Hello, my name's Stephanie Murray. I'm the Career and Employability Advisor here at the University of Greater Manchester, and we're going to talk today about creative CVs. Here are a couple of examples of a creative presentation of a CV. Now, there's some debate about whether a creative CV is a valuable tool to help you stand out in a competitive job market, or whether it can be a bit of a nuisance for recruiters. Obviously, we're not in a position to actually discuss this, but as you go through these slides, I'd like you to consider both the advantages and possible drawbacks to a creative approach to CV presentation. Do you think it could be a useful approach for you? So it's your CV, but we in the careers team see many CVs, and whatever format your CV takes, please consider the following general advice and guidance. Always ensure that you tailor the CV to every role you apply for. One, this could mean that you produce a creative CV. And secondly, include relevant skills and qualities, so those that the employer is asking for. You still need to include the same information as a traditional CV, and it should always be professionally presented, readable and concise, and present the education and work experience in reverse chronological order. So presenting your current or most recent first and working backwards. CV should be no more than 2 sides of A4 when printed. Be consistent in terms of your presentation style, and always check, ask someone else to check the spelling and grammatical errors. So what is a creative CV? Let's think about that, and when might it be appropriate? We might describe it as a creative spin on a traditional CV. As seen by the examples at the beginning of this presentation, you are using the CV to demonstrate your relevant creative skills. So in your application for a role such as a graphic designer or photographer or fashions or textiles. But it could also be used to apply for roles in things like advertising, media, marketing, publishing. So any role that requires some level of creativity, it's a useful tool to demonstrate those skills. So what might be the advantages of presenting a creative CV? At the beginning of these slides, I asked you to think about the advantages, to help you consider if it would be the correct option for you, rather than you just telling an employer about your experiences. So it's an excellent opportunity to demonstrate what you can do. And if it's done well, it can really stand out in a competitive field. And it provides a more personal introduction to you and your experience and skills. Displays your personality, can help recruiters to judge if you might be a good fit for their role or organisation. So think about the CV format and what's relevant to your area of expertise. How are you going to illustrate your CV? How are you going to demonstrate your particular creative skills? So these different formats will depend on what you are studying and what skills you want to demonstrate to an employer. The first option is probably the most popular and one we see quite a lot. The others will require a lot more effort. So we've got a CV that takes the form of a video, an online portfolio, personal website, and something quite alternative. You know, if you make models, or you know, is there some way of demonstrating your particular skill and incorporating the information from a CV into that to catch the attention of an employer? So start with your standard CV and ask yourself, think about the following. What do creative CVs in your particular area look like? Are you demonstrating the skills you want to promote? So as we said earlier, content is still a very important element of the CV. And getting the balance between that and your creativity. Your creativity should enhance your information, not detract from it. You still need to include relevant information that you would on a traditional CV. Getting that balance right. So it can be a risk. The more creative your idea, the bigger the risk. It can be time consuming to produce. And bear in mind, not all employers in the creative field would welcome a particularly creative CV. Some recruiters, again, often very, large recruiters who really receive a lot of applications, might use applicant tracking systems, and something that you've created, even if it's, a CV on paper, might not register with their system, and therefore, you would not become part of that recruitment process. So the main message is, do your research. Assuming you have a choice, find out from the employer that you are applying to what is required. It's fair to say you might be given instructions by the employer on what type of CV they are looking for, but always make sure what you're about to produce or what you're thinking of producing will fit with their requirements. What will your creative CV look like? Will it fit what they want? How will you do that research? It's what we call commercial awareness. So, using websites what can you find out about the organization and the role that you're applying to? Strongly suggest that you have a presence on LinkedIn, and you could contact other employees in that organization or industry to find out how they got in, find out what kind of thing might be appropriate. Again, you could ask the recruiter directly if you have a contact. You could use Google or ChatGPT. What would typically be expected for the type of role in the type of organization that you're applying to? So just to finish off, we have a couple of links to some key resources there, the Prospects website, and there's a lot of advice and guidance in the section there on general CVs, but particular section on creative CVs. And the last one, again from the College of Arts, is a really, really good document on putting together a creative CV. So have a look at those for some guidance. Thank you very much for listening. They're my contact details. If you want to, I am the Link Career Advisor with Creative Courses in the university, and you're very welcome to contact me if you would like to discuss your options, arrange an appointment.